worth looking. If you want to take a look, this little pool, feel free to take, to kind of alternate, let people take a look. This is called Lake Lethe. It's another Greek kind of callback. Lethe is the term for sleep in ancient Greek. And in many cases, in English, for instance, it's the term lethal derives from that, the final sleep, for instance. But this is Lake Lethe. Occasionally, we do see some of our blind fishes here. In fact, here in Kentucky, in this part of Kentucky, in cave country, we are fortunate enough to have two species of blind cave fish, both the northern and the southern cave fish. One of them is found a bit further to the south, and this is the northernmost part of its range. And the other is found a little bit further to the north, in fact, up into the border of the Ohio River. And they aren't found much further south than this. So two species, both of them not a whole lot bigger than my pinky finger. Sometimes very large ones are found that might be as big as my index finger, but not large species. Of course, they are free of pigment. You don't need sunscreen if you never see the sun. No pigment, no eyes. The eyes do not develop. In fact, if you look at them under light, you can just barely see the little heart beating in there. It's almost translucent. So these very special creatures were not trapped down here. What happened is that they do, in fact, still have very close sighted relatives that live on the surface. In fact, some of them, such as the spring cave fish, live in the same areas, but in some of the surface springs. They live in these areas because it's a place where no one else can. There is very little light here, so there are not many predators. But there is also not a whole lot of food. But because these fellows don't have to grow eyes, that energy that would be spent on developing eyes in the first place is put to good use. Their metabolism, their kind of engines that burn food in their body are so efficient, in some cases they can go up to 2 years without eating. These tiny fishes, most tiny fishes are lucky to live a couple of years. These fellows can live 10 or 12 years, perhaps more. So that energy has gone in more useful directions than growing optical equipment they will never need. They spend most of their lives in pitch black darkness. But that doesn't mean they are not aware of what's going on. In fact, that is why even when we visit down here, we rarely see them. That is because they have a very well-developed lateral line. Has anyone ever looked closely at a fish, maybe gone fishing or seen them on a fishing show? There's a line of scales that runs usually from just behind the gills to the fish's tail. And that is filled with nerve endings and special sensory cells that make that fish exquisitely aware of what is happening in the water around it. When the water moves, the fish knows. And these guys are very, very well adapted to pick up movement. In fact, not only can it tell them when the water is moving, it tells them when the land above the water is moving as well. So they are aware of when we are stomping around up here, and they know to stay out of sight. Just because they don't have many predators doesn't mean they don't know to watch out for things that might eat them. But in general, those guys, minus bats, minus pack rats, out of the creatures that spend their whole lives in the cave called troglobites, cave life, these guys are one of the largest of this tiny ecosystem. There is so little to eat down here, they have to depend on the bits of organic debris that wash in during the flood season, or wash in on those underground rivers from the distance beyond, as I said, the overland areas along the highway and further yet. So they get by on very little, and they have a niche that very few other creatures could actually live in. And they're not the only ones. They're including the surface species such as bats and pack rats that are just visitors. There are over 160 known species that have been found in the Mammoth Cave system. Many of them never see the surface, as I said. Over 60 species of beetles. Some of them, in fact, eyeless species that just feed on the eggs of the cave crickets we might see today. There are eyeless isopods related to the little roly-polies you might find in your garden. There are eyeless crayfish, again with no pigment, that have very long antennae and light sensors on their tails. They cannot see, but they know when you're shining a light on them. And there is the highly endangered eyeless cave shrimp. It's about as long as probably my pinky nail. And much like the ghost shrimp you find in a pet store, they look a lot like that. They are freshwater shrimp. And they are only found in 2 counties in Kentucky, Hart and Edmonton, the one we are currently in. So